we're in our 5th book, the book of Deuteronomy. Anyone know what Deuteronomy means? It's our 6th lesson, but our 5th book.
Luke has an idea.
What's the idea?
Well, Luke raised his hand. I think we should call him Luke.
What is it, Luke?
It says on the thing.
What is it? Second law. That's correct. Way to use the resources available at your disposal. It was on the screen. Second law, like duto means. Is that Latin?
Or duo?
Duo. Second law. So.
It's Greek up there.
Oh,
Thank you. Use your resources.
Excellent. Who has watched maybe their favorite TV show, and then they'll have an episode of all recaps, and it goes back and talks about things. That's a common storytelling device. Okay.
They always have that beginning and very beginning.
Well, yes, but sometimes they have all clips episodes
highlights
where they're
reel?
oh, remember when that happened, and then they cut back to the old clip. That's literally Deuteronomy. Okay. So there is total flashbacks in this book. They go back and tell the whole story, leaving Egypt and everything, the wandering. And so it's the one more time. Remember, how did we leave last book in Leviticus?
Someone died.
No, Numbers.
Oh, Aaron died.
Aaron died.
That's right.
Who else?
His son.
They tried
Luke.
to go to the promised land, but
They left.
Balaam.
Yes, Balaam. But where are the people at now? Assuming where are we starting?
wandering.
But who has?
Desert?
Yes, they're still in the
Mount
desert.
Sinai?
No.
No?
So we left last time. The people disobeyed. They had been brought to the edge of the promised land.
Oh, the snake.
They sent the spies in, and then they wouldn't go in. So what happened to that whole generation of people?
Death.
They all died wandering around in the desert.
Look at the bronze snake.
Do they still get manna
So-
when they're wandering then?
Yes, they're still. God took
God
care
is
of
still
them still.
providing for them, even though they're stinky pants.
So the whole generation has died, and now who is left?
Yeshua. Yeshua.
Joshua? Yeah, Joshua and Caleb are left, but who's left? Everyone, remember we saw the age?
20 and under.
So, yes, they were 20 and under. They didn't die, and so now 40 years have passed, so it's this whole new generation of up to 60-year-old people and under, and all their kids. So, a lot of these people that make up the people of Israel now were not, maybe don't remember Egypt. Maybe they don't remember Mount Sinai. Or even if they do remember it, they were teenagers, and you guys forget everything. So,
Right, so only people potentially 52 to 60 would have been, 40 something.
20 years and younger
So
were
40
alive
to
for
60
it.
would have been alive for it.
Yeah.
Under
But
40 not
they
alive.
might not remember. So, why do we need to repeat? Why does Moses need to repeat the law and everything that's happened? Because a lot of them didn't even experience it. So it's a retelling of the events that have happened
So what
before
genre?
the new group of people are about to go in. Okay? So
Genre retelling.
we once again arrived. This is the last one. The last one we'll put down for Moses as the author. Give a tear because we've been writing that down every time. Moses is our author. And genre?
Portion? Oh, is that the final portion?
Oh, no.
Nice. Someone record
Except for the final portion of this book, Moses was the author. Because
Someone
we
record him dying?
because we have Moses dying at the end of the book. So who finished the book?
Joshua.
That's the question. So probably Joshua. We don't know, but we assume Joshua because he becomes the next leader. Genre is historical narrative. Once again, it's to the retelling of events in a story type way. But there's also law in this book because the law is repeated. A lot of the law is repeated. Something Marshall brought up that I heard recently too. Deuteronomy is a very quoted book. First of all, quoted by our founding fathers. I just thought more than any Bible book, but you said any book at all. Deuteronomy is quoted. And it's interesting because Deuteronomy, I mean, it's really kind of repeating a lot of what's already been said, but it also is summarizing it. So it's condensed it down, and it has some great lines and great verses and some great laws in there that are kind of summaries of larger portions of Leviticus and Numbers. So it's kind of like this condensed verse and kind of a highlight reel of the last few books we've been reading. So you can actually get most of the story from this book because Moses hits the highlights. So, also, the most quoted Old Testament book in the New Testament. Jesus quotes Deuteronomy more than any other book, and the whole all the New Testament writers quote this book. I printed out I found this article on all the Deuteronomy quotes in the New Testament, and it's 4 pages long. So there are lots of Deuteronomy quotes. So this would have been a well-known book. Who knows about a Jewish school? Little boys, I'm sorry, girls, those just boys that would go to Jewish school. What was the main thing they would learn?
Torah.
They would learn the Torah, which we're completing now, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And it was their goal to memorize pretty much the whole Torah, or at least be super familiar with it, but memorize large portions of it. They would do this until what age?
12.
They would go to school till 13. And then they would become men, and then young men. Well, it wasn't full men, because
You're not a full man.
we saw what was the age limit that we saw already. What's like the age of true adults that they kind of identified already? 20, right? We just saw that because everyone 20 and younger wasn't accountable for the actions. They were still learning. So there's kind of like this, it's kind of like we have in our society too, like teenagers, this age where you guys are being given more responsibility, but you're not full adults yet. So they kind of had that stage back then too. But
Who
something
is between 13 and 20?
like everyone in
No,
here.
I'm not.
Oh, some of you
Who's
are 12.
12?
So at that age, the Hebrew boys would they kind of take 2 paths. They would either continue, if they were really good at Torah at Jewish school, they would continue to study, maybe to become a rabbi. But otherwise, they are like a teacher of the law and study the law and then follow a rabbi. Otherwise, they would take on their father's trade at that point, and they'd go start learning whatever your father did. Who would be excited if you basically had to do the exact same job your dad did?
What if I got
Who would think that would be cool?
to?
Some of you are interested in that. Who would not at all be interested in doing the job your father does? Yeah, so there's a mix of that. Cool.
I want to say
We're
something.
way off track.
I know. Okay, so just a side thought. The reason they memorized the Torah and Scripture was because they didn't have their own scriptures at home to
good
read.
point.
So they memorized as a way to put God's word in their heart and to be able to access it at any time. We have our Bibles, and we are so blessed to have it. They didn't have it. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that is great. They didn't have the resources we have. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't memorize the Bible, though. That's still a very helpful tool.
Yeah.
Maybe your phone is dead. Maybe you don't have a battery. And just putting it in your mind actually brings it more readily available than, I could look it up. But, it's great to have Scripture memorized. All right, our audience is the next generation of Hebrew people like we talked about. They didn't experience all this. They are now adults and leading their families and leading the people, leading them into the promised land like their former generation failed to do. They need to know this stuff. They need to be equipped and reminded of this stuff. So it's the next generation of Hebrews. When and where? We're at either 407 or 406 BC, or maybe...
You mean 14?
1407, 1406 BC. And where? We are on the east side of the Jordan. So, you got Israel here, the Jordan River, and then the Sea of Galilee, and the Dead Sea, and then this is the main chunk of Israel. They're on this side of it, looking into the Promised Land. They're about to cross the Jordan and become, Jessica? Hebrews, which means to cross the Jordan, right?
Yeah.
So our bus driver, our guide, every time we'd cross the Jordan into Israel, as we're driving around, he'd be like, "No, you're all Hebrews," because we crossed the Jordan. So this is like
Last
them.
language.
This is them entering the promised land. Very significant. It's actually, they get called this because they cross the Jordan into the promised land. They become Hebrews, not just Israelites. They are now taking possession of the promised land. They become Hebrews. Our main characters are Moses, who is basically, this whole book is almost like speeches from Moses. It's kind of how it's laid out. He gives different addresses, different topics. And then we'll put Joshua in there because Joshua really rises up now to be the new leader. Because, as we found out in the last book, what is going to happen to Moses? Moses can't do what? He cannot become a Hebrew. He cannot enter the promised land. Because, why?
He hit a rock.
He disobeyed God. He struck the rock instead of speaking to it. And also the Bible Project, remember, brought out, oh, we didn't really get into it, but I thought it was interesting. He kind of said, like, why must we bring this water from this rock? And kind of took credit a bit for what God was doing. But he was angry, he was upset, and now he is also punished alongside that whole generation. Not to die in the wandering, but he dies in this book. And it says God brought him up to a mountain, and he wasn't yet old, and then he died, and God buried him. His eyes were still strong, he still had youth. He's 120 years old.
So he was old, and then the 40 years passed.
Yeah. So remember, we talked about Moses' life in 3 chunks. What was the first 40-year chunk?
Egypt.
He was in Egypt. What's the second 40-year chunk? Approximately.
With the person
No.
that
With his
Well,
ship.
he was ran away from Egypt because he killed a guy and was hiding in Midian and being a shepherd. What's his third 40-year-ish chunk
Trying to get the
of life?
Israelites out of Egypt.
Wandering.
Yes, he went to Egypt, brought the Israelites out, the 12 plagues and all that, and then received the law and wandering in the desert. So we've arrived to the final 40-year chunk of his life. All right. So let's go over the main events. We've got basically, like I said, there's kind of these 3 big addresses. Moses's basically sermons, talks. I don't know, TED Talks. No, they're pretty long, longer than a TED Talk. These 4 teaching sermons, addresses, we'll call them. First address. He is focusing on the past. He is talking about, like we said, the highlights. What has God done for us? Like we've seen a bunch of times, like even when they make the golden calves, what do they say to these golden calves? When they're at the fountain? What? Look at these. These are the gods. Aaron says this. These are the gods who brought you out of Egypt, which is a total lie, and it's also stupid because it just happened months ago, and they know these stupid golden calves that they just made from their jewelry didn't do anything to destroy Egypt and send the plagues. Who did that? God did. So they need to know, what has God done for us? So Moses reminds them. He goes over. He talks about being at Sinai. He talks about appointing leaders. He talks about when the scouts were sent in, and then the 10 came back with a bad report and were scared. And the 2, Joshua and Caleb had the good report. And then they rebel against the Lord, and they decide to go in anyway. And then remembering chapter 2 now, remembering Israel's wanderings. And then he talks about victories in battle that they've had. And then chapter 4, what's your heading say for chapter 4? Should be in Deuteronomy, page 110 I'm at.
Who needs a Bible?
Call to obedience.
Call to obedience. Mine says Moses urges Israel to obey. They have constantly disobeyed. They have left, God's instructions. They've ignored God's instructions. They've complained. And then it even talks about Moses forbidden to enter the land. So a quick highlight reel of what all has happened. And then a warning against idolatry. Over and over, the people have turned back to idolatry, and we'll see that they will continue to turn to idolatry Yeah, maybe only just once. I said over and over again. They will continue. This is a wise warning, even though it doesn't really work. But we see as a cycle of the people that we'll continue to see in Joshua and Judges. Over and over, they start worshiping the idols of their neighbors. So as they go into the promised land, they're going to among a people that they're supposed to conquer and remove. And we're going to talk about that a lot, how crazy that is. But they don't do a full job that God asked them to do. And so they're around neighbors who worship idols, and they keep getting tempted to worship these same idols. So now when we have Moses' second address, so he kind of just does this big review of everything that's happened, and then we enter his second address, which is, we'll call it Principles for Godly Living. And this is the longest one. This is the longest chunk here. And it basically has a lot of the law we've talked about, but it's kind of written differently. It's less of like, do this. It's kind of more of a sermon. It's more principles that Moses is preaching of. Look over this section and maybe call out some headings that stand out to you. We're in chapters like 4, 5 through 28.
Well, right away on chapter 5, I see the 10 Commandments again.
Yeah. 10 Commandments are repeated again. So you could say, well, it's actually in the Bible 3 times, I think, right? No, just Exodus in here?
Yeah, I think so.
Love the Lord all of your heart.
Yeah. So it's repeated. You could just say, why don't they just look it up in their other book? But remember, they don't all have copies of the Bible, right? So this is a new giving. So they would have, I think, heard this spoken. If it's an address, right, that's a spoken thing. And then it was also...
Brian,
Yes.
reminds me, in our family devotions, we're talking about Jesus giving his last address to his disciples before he's arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And I would say, if someone knows that they're going to die soon, they will share the most important things with you.
Yeah.
So Moses knows his time of wandering is up, and the people are going to enter without him. So he's communicating all the important things with the people that he can't continue to shepherd them when they're in the promised land. So this is Moses' like what? His
final words,
address.
really it is. It's like kind of, this is what you need to know. I'm going to be leaving you, and I hope you remember these things. Good luck, but here's what you need to know to survive. So we got the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God who rescued out of the land of Egypt, your place of slavery. You must have no other God but me. You must not make yourself an idol of any kind. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely against your neighbor. You must not covet your neighbor's wife or land or servant or anything else that belongs to them.
See in chapter 16, it's a reminder about the Passover and the festival of remembering that. So a reminder that they will remember the Passover and they're leaving Egypt.
Yeah, I read that. I know.
In chapter 6, it has the greatest commandment.
Yes.
What is the greatest commandment?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then love your neighbor as yourself.
So
Jesus added that love your neighbor in the New Testament, right? It's not here in Deuteronomy?
it is here.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, tell me what verse I want to read it.
Deuteronomy 6, 4. So what we have here, it doesn't say neighbor here.
Yeah, I think neighbor was, and that's why Jesus says the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus adds that.
So
second.
basically, which Jesus repeats and love your neighbor as yourself. You must not worship. Is that in there? Is it somewhere else?
I think only the greatest commandment is here. Love the Lord your God with all your heart.
So this Deuteronomy 6:4. I want everybody to look there. This is one of the most important things for the Hebrew people. This is called the Shema.
So
the
everyone
Shema.
turn to Deuteronomy
Shema.
6 verse 4. Deuteronomy 6 verse 4.
Oh, I looked up what the Shema means. The Shema.
Deuteronomy 6 verse 4. No, Georgia just asked again. No, he wants the Shema.
Yeah.
Shema is verse 4.
I want the Shema.
The Shema. The Shema. It just means to hear.
Hear, O Israel.
Shema means to hear.
Okay.
So it starts with, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So why is that a significant statement? What does every other culture believe about gods? Yes, I gave it away with my plural. But yes, that there's multiple gods. The Israelites were really the only monotheistic religion. Everyone else is polytheistic, right?
That's what that means, babe. Monotheistic.
Mono means one, poly means many. So every other religion in the world at this time believed in many gods. There was a god for rain, a god for the sun, a god for the ground, a god for the animals, a god for everything, right? Like what we saw in Egypt when they left Egypt, there was gods for all the, and each plague kind of referred to one of the different gods of Egypt. So they are a one God people. They believe there is one God, and that's different than all the other people in the world. Technically now there'd probably be 3 religions in the world that are monotheistic. Do you know what they are?
The Abrahamic religions.
They all are Abrahamic religions. Good point. They all are from this because of even,
Judaism.
well, Catholic would be under the Christianity umbrella.
Judaism, Christianity, Muslim.
Judaism and Islam. And why is Islam a Abrahamic religion?
Because
It's a descendant of Abraham.
Yes, they trace their lineage back to Abraham through the other son, the unchosen son of Ishmael, right? Remember, Abraham was like, God's not giving me a son, and his wife is like, here, have a son with my handmaiden. Maybe that will work. Maybe that's God's plan. No, it's not. They do have a son, and God still does take care of this son that's illegitimate, still takes care of him. And eventually, this is after even the New Testament is when Islam starts. But anyway, I have to give myself more time, and then we go on more bunny trails is all that happens because I don't feel rushed. So, the Shema. Sorry, that's where we're at. Listen, our God, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
How do you spell that?
Alone. The Shema, S-H-E-M-A. The Shema. The Shema. So this is what's repeated like daily by Jews. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and with all your strength. So we did this. Who was at the middle school camp out? This was our guide this past year. Yeah, we studied what does it mean to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind.
Loving
With
the Lord
everything.
with all of us.
So this is one of the most important things and very much repeated. And then I love how it says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Tie them on your hands, wear them on your foreheads, reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house, on your gates. So remind them to your children. This is so important as we're seeing like another generation. They need these constant reminders. Why do we go to church every week? Why don't we go just like once a year?
Because we are stupid people and we forget things.
We forget things. I mean, there's other reasons, fellowship and other things too. But yes, why, the festivals, like the things we repeat. Why do we have holidays every year? Why does our country make a holiday for Veterans Day, for all these different things? Just to remind us, right? These remind us. We have Christmas. They're reminders. All right. More law, more principles for godly living. All through this, they have some this is all kind of review. I don't know if there's anything truly new in here. It's really review of different laws and things that they need to do, but it's reminders again for people that weren't there the first time or probably wouldn't remember it. They were children. Okay.
Wow. Don't be a rebellious son in this time.
What
Chapter
happens?
21, verse 18. Suppose a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or mother, even though they discipline him. In such a case, the father or mother must take the son to the elders and hold court at the town gate. The parents must say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious and refuses to obey. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of this town must stone him to death. In this way you will purge the evil from among you, and all Israel will hear about it and be afraid.
Okay, but listen.
Wow.
This whole thing is like
Don't be a rebellious
unsolved
son.
murders. If a murder victim is found lying in a field in the land the Lord your God given to you possess, the elders and it is not known who killed him, your elders notice are to come out and measure the distance from the victim to the nearby cities. It's so weird.
Yeah, then they pick an animal in that city to be offered as a sacrifice.
Interesting. It's like, oh yeah, you find a murdered dude.
Yeah.
What if he's just dead? What if he's not murdered?
So a lot's in here. A bunch of things are repeated. I'm just kind of looking through things, all that are repeated in the New Testament, in Corinthians and Acts. Yes, lots. Oh, there's one thing I wanted to look at. Look at Deuteronomy 21:23.
We're not to leave his corpse on the tree overnight.
Would someone read 22 and 23?
Sorry, Deuteronomy 21 verses what?
22 and 23.
I can.
Go for it, Trevor.
And if a man has committed a crime punishable by death, and he is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him the same day. For a hanged man is cursed by God. You shall not defile your land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance.
Who do you think? Who does this remind you of?
Jesus.
Yeah. So, Jesus. It talks about how Jesus was cursed for us, right? Like, this is kind of a reference to even, and then he wasn't left up there overnight.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like talking about like their tradition of what like the rules.
So Jesus was killed in this way, which is a cursed way, and so even in the way they viewed that type of death, even back then. Okay, so lots of review on the principles for godly living. The third address, it's just kind of another speech. Starts in 29. Moses summons all the Israelites and said to them, "You've seen with your own eyes everything the Lord did in the land of Egypt and Pharaoh and all his servants in the whole country." So this is kind of like his final speech, right? He says a call to return to the Lord. He reviews the covenant, and then in 31, something changes, and this is our third section. What is changing for the people of Israel?
Joshua takes Moses' place.
A new leader is chosen.
He's 120.
So, verse 1, yes, he says, he finished giving these instructions, and he says, "I am now 120 years old. I'm no longer able to lead you. The Lord has told me, you must not cross the Jordan River and become a Hebrew. You can't cross the Jordan."
What verse are you in? I'm sorry.
31, verse 2 now, 3. "But the Lord himself will cross over ahead of you." So he's reminding them that the Lord is still with them. Like Moses was the very special chosen person to lead the people. He had a special relationship with God. But just because Moses is leading them does not mean the Lord is leading them, which the people could be afraid of. "The Lord, your God, himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy the nations living there, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua will lead you across the river, just as the Lord promised." So Joshua is the new leader. And
look at verse 31, verse 9. I
Yeah.
love this.
So what happens to this book? So Moses wrote the entire body of instruction in a book and gave it to the priests who carried it in the Ark of the Covenant. Moses gave them this command. "At the end of every 7th year, the year of release during the festival of shelters, you must read this book." They would read this whole book every 7 years. That's kind of weird. "You must read this book to all the people when they assemble." So this
it
is.
says like men, women, children, and foreigners. They want everyone to.
Do you think that includes the whole Torah, or is that just Deuteronomy? I'm curious. I don't know the answer.
This entire body of instruction in a book. I don't know.
I don't know if he's referring to just Deuteronomy or if he's now completed the whole Torah. Do they read the whole Torah? That's something that could be looked up, but I do not know. And then we end, like any good episode, with a song.
Bible Project split.
Moses starts singing. Moses starts singing a song. He sings a song, a very long song. The whole of chapter 32. I do not know the tune. I will not try to sing it for you. "Listen, O heavens, and I will speak." I don't know.
Wow.
If someone would write a song,
Yeah,
Trevor,
also in a different
will you
language.
make this a metal song?
I don't know how to play the song.
Okay. Well, you should. You should make. Someone should make this an actual song.
Make it a rap.
Where's Caitlin? Caitlin could make this a wrap.
Oh, okay.
Moses' death. Okay, Moses
I remember that.
blesses the people, and then chapter 34. This is where we get into like, how did Moses write this? Then Moses went up to Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab, climbed the Pisgah peak, which is across from Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land. He got to look at the promised land, but did not get to go in.
God buried Moses.
Yes, and then he died. He's like, I allowed you to see it with your own eyes, but you will not enter the land. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land, just as the Lord had said, and the Lord buried him. But to this day, no one knows the exact place. Why do you think God did that?
So no one would go and take his body and be like,
Take his body,
I
maybe.
don't know.
I mean,
This is holy
okay,
ground.
what has become like people have built shrines around the graves of people that were super important. I think God did this to like remove like the desire to idolize and worship Moses.
And then people could never bring his body into the land.
Oh yeah, that too, probably.
That'd be disobedience.
Whose bodies did they have with them? Bible trivia.
Joseph.
They had Joseph
I just read
and
that in my Bible study.
Jacob.
and Jacob's bodies with them. Because they died in Egypt, and Joseph asked, "Bring my body back to."
Skeletons now, bro.
Yes, not body.
Well,
Well,
he said
they
bones,
maybe were
bones.
embalmed like
Bones,
Egyptian
bones.
mummy
Yeah, maybe
way.
they were mummified.
They could have been mummified.
No,
Yes,
but the Bible said
It-
bones.
it's likely actually.
Yes.
So they were probably preserved, brought with them. That's some great Bible trivia for you. All right, this is the land I promised. They died in the land. How long did the people of Israel mourn for him?
30 days.
30 days. Now Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him, doing just as the Lord had commanded Moses. This is kind of a final awesome thing about Moses. Listen to this. There has never been another prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. The Lord sent and performed all the miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh, and all his servants in the entire land. With mighty power, Moses performed terrifying acts in the sight of all Israel. To Jewish people, Moses is like the best, and this would be why. He is the most important, the most celebrated, the most significant. So that's the end of Moses, and that's the end of Deuteronomy. Let's watch the Bible Project video on it.
You're like, yeah, I should read that again.
Yes. So, what else? What else? You like what, Eddie? Sorry, say that again.
Just reading these laws and the questions unresolved in Torah, then you think of like
Yeah.
people with the when they're reading Torah.
It's interesting, right? Because this is the end of Moses' life, but it's not the end of the story. I like that they brought out the things that are not yet resolved. They're not in the land yet. They haven't solved the problem. They haven't crushed Satan. They haven't crushed evil. What could we say for a purpose of this book? A reminder, yes, I have that too. To remind people of what God has done and encourage them to rededicate their lives to Him. You could also say to prepare the people for entering the promised land, or you could also say Moses' last words, Moses' final speech, Moses' final instructions, like his most important, like kind of deathbed talk, right? Kind of thing. If you're going to die, what would you tell everyone around you? I buried the gold under the tree. Remember? No, this is, the most important things, if you have nothing else to say. How do we see Jesus in this book?
We looked at this verse.
We looked at one kind of foretelling.
Oh, it was the one in
Or one law that relates to him.
verse 21, 22, and 23.
So we see that someone who is hung on a tree is cursed. Cursed.
Chapter 21, verses 22 and 23.
Yeah. So Galatians connects to that. Galatians 3:13 reminds us of that. It's Galatians 3:13 says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a pole. So Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us, is how Galatians connects it. So Christ is the solution to the consequences of breaking the law. he becomes the curse. He takes the curse on himself, removes the curse from us. Awesome, pointing to Jesus. Timeless truth. What's the one thing that we should remember from this book? What's the one thing that Jews repeat every day? I'm going to say the Shema. I think the Shema should be our timeless truth.
Shema.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Love your God with everything. Everything. Sometimes the Bible includes mind. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it writes it differently. What's the point of that? Does some think we shouldn't love God with our mind, or what? Like here, it doesn't say mind. No, it just means everything. It's trying to say everything, right? So there's different ways of saying everything. Love the Lord your God with everything. Their heart, soul, and strength. So I think that should be our timeless truth. If you love God with everything, everything, your life will be in order if you're loving God with everything. Everything's dedicated to Him. Everything's about Him. Everything's for Him because He made everything and He is everything. So that's a good way to live life. All right, that's the book of Deuteronomy.
Addison, you can ask